It's no secret the Miami Hurricanes need more reinforcements on the defensive side of the football. Got a couple of important defensive backs, one visiting and one who's already getting linked to the U.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. We made it. Shout out to the everydayers. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and writer for Canes County at Rivals. And thank you so much to those everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. On this loaded episode, we're going to talk a little bit later on with our second guest of the day about the Heisman ceremony because our guy Phil Russomano was out there covering it. We'll talk about the season Cam Ward just had with our first guest. We're going to talk about fixing Miami's defense, the best quarterback plan for the Hurricanes in 2025 after missing out on John Mateer earlier this week. He chose Oklahoma. Let's talk latest in the transfer portals. We got our guy William Padron from 305 Sports Now. So, Will, a smile came across my face yesterday when I saw that Xavier Lucas, who is a freshman sensation cornerback at Wisconsin. I don't know how we let this guy leave town and go up to Wisconsin in the first place because he's a former American Heritage standout. He's got 3 years of eligibility left. He actually had the highest Pro Football Focus grade this past season on Wisconsin's entire defense. He's a cornerback. We know Miami needs corners. Miami needs safeties. The Hurricanes already got a safety with Poiser, but Xavier Lucas, this one is really intriguing to me, Will, and we're already starting to see some predictions that Miami could end up being the spot for him in the portal.
Yeah, well, Miami did want him when he was being recruited about a couple of years ago, and he chose Wisconsin. So now he's in the transfer portal, and Miami is hot under the collar to get him. He is being predicted by a couple of people to become a Miami Hurricane, and we could really use the help. The fact that he was a true freshman, he'll have about 2 or 3 years of eligibility left, and he'll definitely help out a position of which we did struggle with this year, which was the defensive backfield. So I'm really excited for him to have the possibilities of becoming a Miami Hurricane. He had a very, very solid season for being a true freshman, played 11 out of 12 games. He had 18 total tackles, 1 interception, 1 sack as well. So he could be used in different varieties. You can use him in pass coverage. You can use him to stop the run and even chase down the quarterback as well. So I do think this is a get the Canes need. It would add not just depth, but a guy who would come in to start right away for you as well and help out in the boundaries.
Yeah, and I like the idea of all these young players Miami can add to the secondary because Zechariah Poiser, who they added at safety, has 3 years of eligibility left. If Miami can seal the deal for Xavier Lucas, he's got 3 years of eligibility left. O.J. Frederic has 3 years of eligibility left. Damari Brown, who was able to preserve his red shirt in the second year, he's got 3 years of eligibility left. Zaquan Patterson, same thing at safety. So, the idea that Miami can maybe, if things go as planned, have a defensive back room full of guys with a ton of eligibility left, rising stars like this, I'd be really happy about it. Are you worried about someone else swooping in and getting Lucas? Because it was nice to see that crystal ball drop in Miami's favor. It was actually from a Wisconsin insider on 24/7. So he must think that, maybe Miami could be the reason why Lucas hit the portal in the first place, but he's definitely going to be sought after. I mean, what do you think it's going to take for Miami to seal the deal?
Well, it's like you've mentioned on your show in the past, it's all about relationships, and Miami was, heavy on his recruitment. So I do think the fact that he already is familiar with the coaching staff, understands Coach Cristobal, understands the culture of the Miami Hurricane locker room. Also, American Heritage is a school that Miami heavily recruits as well. Malachi Tony, Damari Brown as well, Mark Fletcher. Those are all guys that, played with Xavier Lucas. So I'm sure they're probably chirping in his ear about possibly coming over to the team. You can't count out the SEC. That's the one thing I will say that is a fear. They're loaded with money, and we all know money talks in the portal. They're loaded with money, and they may try to seek an opportunity to try to lure him out, to possibly becoming a Cane in general. But I think he's Miami's guy to lose. If the fact you have a Wisconsin insider basically saying he's going to Miami, he's being crystal balled to Miami, he's Miami's player to lose. So I'm sure that they'll find a good, they'll find a good package for him. Well, and they'll talk to him about, the possibility of what the chance of him starting or at least getting on the field quite a bit are for Miami as well. So he's going to have a lot of guys too, because it's a very young group. And a guy you left out, sir, is Ryan Mack. That's another guy that's making headway as as a Canes defensive backfields go. He was injured throughout the season. That's why we never saw him alongside with Frederic. So you would have Lucas, Frederic, Mack, Brown, and incoming freshman Chris Ewald as well, Bryce Fitzgerald as well, and Emory Williams. This is going to be a no-fly zone if the defense can get things right.
And Miami is hosting another one. I think he's on his visit today. And that's, we missed out on one Washington State player this week. Maybe Miami can land another, and that's safety Adrian Wilson, who's in the transfer portal. I know you've been taking a look at his numbers. He's visiting Miami. And again, folks, defensive tackles, we'll talk more about that, but defensive backs is a serious need for Miami after the season we just had.
Yeah, Wilson, another true freshman. There's a pattern with what Miami's looking at right now. They want guys with some eligibility. Again, 37 total tackles, 1 forced fumble, 3 pass deflections, 47 total tackles. He's a guy that, he could be a plug-and-play guy as well, or you could use him on a rotation as well. I do think one of the issues that the Canes had this year in the defensive backfield is that they failed to move guys into different places. For example, i.e. Mish Powell. Mish Powell played a lot of safety, but towards the end of the season, he was much better at the nickel position. I do hope that they do rotate these guys a little bit more and they place them in the right spots where they need to be a lot more successful. So again, I think Lucas you do need a cornerback. You definitely do need a cornerback. And I think Adrian Wilson, with the fact that Poiser was just picked up by the Canes, and of course you have Saquon Patterson, which is a flat out beast. I think Wilson could come in and be a good rotational piece for that backfield.
So we're talking about defensive guys, and I've gotten some comments on Locked On Canes YouTube and on X the last couple days, with all this quarterback talk about Mateer and everything. Like, how come we're not looking at defenders? Of course, Miami's looking at defensive players. Just sometimes when you're in it for the biggest quarterback, that steals the headlines. But it doesn't mean Miami's done on offense, though. Now, Miami landed CJ Daniels at wide receiver earlier this week, but another receiver that the Hurricanes are in hot pursuit of, and this guy has really become a priority, and he just wrapped up his Miami visit, and Miami is trying to make a move here, and that's for Kevin Casey Concepcion, former NC State slot receiver, who Miami would love to bring in. And again, Miami's really making a move here. I know Colorado is really working hard for him, Alabama, Texas A&M. He's going to make his decision, he said, after the new year. So we're going to be waiting in suspense for the next, 10, 11, 12 days or so. But I know Miami's trying with Concepcion. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. We need to replace Xavier Restrepo, whether that's internally or externally. But if you're looking for a Restrepo replacement, you cannot possibly do any better than Casey Concepcion.
Yeah, he was a beast, over and he was a one bright spot on offense for NC State, aside for CJ Bailey coming in and taking over the helm. But he's a beast. You could ask him to do anything and he'll do it. He's a guy that, in the slot position, he's dangerous. You can move him in motion. He's dangerous as well. Knows how to find the open space on the football field. Has very solid hands. Is very quick as well. You can put him out in the boundary on wheel routes if you wanted to. He could take it deep as well. He's very, very, very multifaceted. Basically, he was the everything man that the year that the NC State beat Miami. I mean, his best year was the year we faced them when he had 71 receptions, 839 yards, but he had 10 touchdowns. He saw the end zone 10 times. Casey is a must get, especially since now we need some wide receivers because of potentially it's going to be the loss of Zay Horton, and you have a couple guys going into the draft this year as well. So Miami will need some wide receivers with experience to add depth, to our football team. And what better than to get a guy that's like Xavier Restrepo, like, someone that could be familiar with the offense, stylistically speaking, fits what Shannon Dawson likes to do with his slot receivers as well. Casey is the perfect fit for this offense. He'll be greatly utilized and utilized the right way, as we saw the 2 seasons that Shannon Dawson had his hands on with Restrepo.
Yeah, and that's, to me, that's got to be, and I'm sure it was a huge part of Shannon Dawson's recruiting pitch to Concepcion, is in my offenses, slot receivers always get featured. Because before Xavier Restrepo, who has set all the significant career receiving records at Miami, when Dawson was at Houston, Tank Dell was setting records left and right as a slot receiver. So, I mean, what other evidence do you need that this has happened with not only multiple different players, but on multiple different teams? We have had slot receivers who have really stepped up and become focal points of the offense. So I think that's got to be a big part of it with Concepcion. And of course, one thing we have to wonder, Will, is who's going to be throwing these guys the football next year. I have, and I know you have as well on 305 Sports Now, made the case for Emory Williams. We don't have 100% guarantee that he's going to be the starting quarterback next year. So I want to talk about the plan and what that should look like after, Miami took a swing at John Mateer. They missed. He's an Oklahoma Sooner. So what do we do next? How do we pivot at the quarterback position? You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We're only getting started on this Friday episode of Locked On Canes. You want to keep it locked. Folks, I'm so glad that Rocket Money is with us here on the Locked On Network, because they've saved me money, guys. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, and even the goals you want to hit this year. I love that feature. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't really using anymore. Some I was not using at all, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing out about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/locked on. We are also proudly brought to you by the Game Time app. Guys, I don't know why you're not using Game Time. I've saved so much money on tickets. I'm going to surprise my son with some concert tickets coming up this Christmas. So, folks, you want to check this out. You get the best deals at the last minute. And, folks, Game Time is focused on togetherness this holiday season, which means you bring people together at live events. The experience is that much better, and it's the perfect gift. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to live events even easier. I used Game Time Picks, by the way, for all my Christmas shopping. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Folks, I love the all-in pricing feature at Game Time. Shows you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. So let's do your holiday shopping on the Game Time app. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and I take you around the conference. We've been talking playoffs this week. You've got SMU taking on Penn State, Clemson taking on Texas. You want to make sure you check out Locked On ACC, much like Locked On Canes. It's available free wherever you get your pods and available free on YouTube. Also, I really enjoy 305 Sports Now with Will Padron, who joins us now. So, Will, what would you like to see happen now at the quarterback position? And I think Miami could still, could still add another quarterback, because only 3 scholarship guys is a pretty thin room. But should they be going after another probable starter? Should they be pivoting to Fernando Mendoza? Should they wait to see if Quinn Ewers becomes available, which might happen because they want to force him out for Arch Manning? Or should Miami really focus at building a team around Emory Williams?
All right, so I'm gonna start first by saying that it feels like a civil war amongst the fan base. Those that love Emory and those that just want to see Emory replaced. I'm gonna let everybody know right now, like I did on my show. The only person that I wanted over Emory Williams, and I'm being sincere, was John Mateer. John Mateer is just a freak. Okay, of an athlete, great arm. As I told my friends last night at the FTSN network, it's like Jalen Waddle playing quarterback. He has speed and he has the elusiveness as well. that you would like if you'd like a dual threat quarterback. But John Mateer's not coming. So I'm all in on Emory Williams, right? I'm all in on Emory Williams. I like Emory Williams' ceiling, despite what a lot of people saw in the Clemson game where they thought it was just Miami's defense playing a key role and keeping him in the game and got him into overtime. People forget that Emory Williams had to make those throws to Colby Young on one-on-one coverage that were big boy throws to get Miami into position to get into overtime and beat Clemson. People forget that Emory Williams broke his arm in a potential game-tying or game-winning drive against Florida State. And who knows if he stays in the game, what happens in that game. Those are very two tough circumstances to throw a true freshman into. And Emory showed leadership, went out there and was the field general and did what was expected of him. The playbook was watered down for him because he's a true freshman, and those are very tough teams. But he did what he was told, and he executed to perfection. He didn't make any ridiculous mistakes with the football at all. That being said, I do think Emory Williams deserves a shot to be QB1 this year. Based upon that, he knows the offense. His teammates like him as well. He's proven he's a leader. He's got the size. The only thing that I have seen in commonality is that people don't like the fact he's not dynamic with his legs. Okay, I want to remind everybody we were murdered by a guy who could barely move, named Kyle McCord in Syracuse. Sorry to bring up those harsh memories, but he barely moved and he torched the Canes. Okay, so pocket passers with the right offensive line. This team is built for Emory Williams to be successful. You have a very good offensive line. You have a stud running back room, and you have very good tight ends and very good wide receivers. So that being said, Emory Williams should not scare anybody if he's QB1. Going back to your question, Alex, about should we get someone else like Quinn Ewers? No. Okay, Quinn Ewers is going to want to be a starter. I say no. I'd rather get a guy who's a little bit cheaper. If you want to bring in Fernando Mendoza, I'm okay with that. But Mendoza is going to have to understand that he's going to be competing for the QB1 spot, and more than likely, he may be QB2. That's all I'm saying. He'll be a little cheaper than it will be to bring in a Quinn Ewers. So that's where I think the Canes should go, because you're right. It's Emory Williams, Judd Anderson, and incoming freshman Luke Nickel. You got three guys. We saw what happened a couple of years ago when you don't have that many guys they're able to plug in. You end up with, Emory Williams being your starter because, again, Jacoby Brown just didn't get that shot. But the bottom line is, though, you need at least four guys. And I do think if we bring in a guy, it should be like a Reese Poffenbarger type of deal, where the guy could push Emory. To be his best, but he'll be a dependable backup if, God forbid, Emory does happen to get hurt again, and he's able to lead the offense. That's where I think we should look at as far as the plan for QB in 2025. I'm all in on Emory. Just because he's not the most dynamic runner doesn't mean he can't handle this offense. It will be more run heavy because now you don't have Cam Ward slinging it. But no one's Cam Ward. Cam Ward is a generational player. He's the best quarterback in the country, despite what the Heisman voters say. Ninja, he's the best quarterback in the country, bar none. Okay, won the Xavier O'Brien trophy for a reason, and he's probably going to be the first quarterback taken in the draft, bar none. So, but I think Emory's is competent and capable enough of leading this offense for next season.
No, I think you hit a lot of it on the head. You bring up, people have concerns about him not having, a lot of mobility. I think another concern, and this is fair, is that he's not a proven commodity, right? That obviously, John Mateer is an incredibly proven commodity. Fernando Mendoza is much more of a proven commodity because he's got a couple of years now of starts under his belt. But my point is, like, someone can't be a proven commodity until they get their opportunity to play. That's number one. And then I know for a fact that Cam Ward believes in Emory, and it's not just something that he says in front of the cameras. It's something he says behind the scenes as well. Emory, and again, I'm not trying to compare him to John Mateer. I'm just comparing the situation, right? I don't know if Emory has as much juice as Mateer had this past year, but Emory got a chance to sit and learn behind Ward the same way Mateer did. And I think in a lot of cases, you can learn more from Cam Ward than you can from your actual coaches, because you get to play behind him and see his habits and all that. So I would be intrigued by Emory Williams getting an opportunity to start at Miami. I really would. And here's another thing, Will, that no matter who your quarterback is, if anything, if you're in a situation where, you're not paying seven figures to a quarterback out of the transfer portal like you would have been for Mateer, this gives you an opportunity to allocate some of those NIL funds to other spots, because yes, Miami just had arguably the best quarterback to ever wear orange and green, and you still didn't win quite enough games to get into the college football playoff because your defense wasn't good enough and certain other aspects of your team were not good enough, even with Cam Ward there. So If you're going to focus on a quarterback who has, more limitations than Ward, because everybody has more limitations than Cam Ward does, maybe this gives you an opportunity to allocate more NIL funds into surrounding Emory Williams, who I think is very good and can be very good with the best possible talent. So that might be the approach. You went all in for a quarterback last year, and he was one of the best to ever play at Miami. You still didn't win enough. Maybe this year you try to surround a very good but not necessarily great quarterback with as much talent as possible. Maybe we try that approach this year.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And listen, going back to the mobility aspect of things, at the end of the day, football is about the trenches, and it's all about the offensive line. If the offensive line is blocking for Emory Williams, he's going to be successful because you have time to throw. And that's the same thing. Like Tyler Van Dyke's interception problems was not because the protection broke down. It's because he misread the defense. And why was Cam Ward so successful this year? Because his sack numbers went way down from Washington State. He got sacked 22 times this year at Miami. Some cases he held on to the ball a little too long, but the year before he got sacked 38 times over at Wazoo. So that being said, it's all about the line. And we have a bunch of returning starters. All we really need is a center, but I'm pretty confident that Ryan Rodriguez could fill in that role quite nicely, especially with the coaching of Alex Mirabal. But also, again, it allocating resources. We need tackles because we're losing some guys. We need some tackles. I think we're fine at end. Maybe one linebacker. And again, I think we should invest in the defensive backfield. I think that's going to be your bread and butter of where you should allocate your resources in NIL to, and making sure that Miami has the best defensive backfield possible to make sure that complementary football is played and not and it's not one side of the ball that's carrying the team.
We always enjoy talking to Will. Will, let people know what they can find on your channel, because you would do a great job at 305 Sports Now. Where can they find you? When can they find you? And what can they find when they get there?
Thank you. I appreciate you so much, Alex. Thank you so much for having me on here, Locked On Canes. I'm a big fan of the show. Like I said, I've been a big fan of you for years. Been listening to you on WQAM as well. Okay, so you can find me on YouTube, right, at 305 Sports Now. You can also find me on X at William Padron at 305 Sports Now as well. I have my episodes, they vary. They're not always consistently day to day, but I was online last night. I did a live episode with the guys of the FTSN network where we talked about the fate of Tua Tagovailoa and the Miami Dolphins. So check that episode out. Today at 4, I'll be airing an episode on the future being bright with Luke Nickel at quarterback. So I'll be doing a special on Luke Nickel as well. So thank you so much again, Alex, for having me on.
I love it. We appreciate Will Padron. We're going to talk with my paisan, Phil. He's going to talk about covering the Heisman ceremony this past week. We'll talk some Pop-Tart Bowl as well. So we appreciate Will Padron. We keep it rolling right here on this brand new Friday episode of Locked On Canes. You want to keep it locked. This episode is proudly brought to you by the College Football Playoff. Even if our Hurricanes can't be in the CFP, at least Locked On Canes is in the CFP, and we will be absolutely locked in because it's that time of year. The College Football Playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. And TNT Sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins tomorrow, December 21st, starting with the CFP kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m., leading into our first matchup, which will be the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch. Today, we're available free wherever you get your podcast. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I was living vicariously through our next guest last weekend because our guy, Phil Russomano, my paisano, who just, by the way, he's got more degrees than Cam McCormick. This guy just finished his master's at Miami. And Phil, you had the privilege of covering the Heisman Trophy ceremony last week. I know our guy Ward came up short, but talk about that experience you had in New York City and if you got some FaceTime with Ward out there.
Absolutely. And first I want to say, Alex, thanks for having me on the show. Actually, my Spotify Wrapped #1 podcast, so I'm living the dream right now. So
thank you so much. I appreciate that, man. I'm always whenever I hear that, I always wonder. It's like, man, you guys don't have any other podcasts to listen to, but I appreciate it.
No, absolutely. But yeah, I went back up to New York last week, was able to see the Heisman ceremony, was a really interesting kind of experience just because the last time we've had a Miami Hurricane up there in New York was about 20 years ago or so. So seeing a fresh face up there in New York was a really good experience. Getting to interview all of the different finalists was a really interesting experience too. But for how each interview went with every individual, because we were able to interview each individual one at like their own little section, being able to interview like Gabriel and Cam to see like the differences in quarterbacks, and then Travis Hunter and then Jonty too. It was a really like interesting, like kind of like whole experience of seeing like their journeys to get to where they were as the finalists, where they like were coming from in terms of like they're either playoff like preparing for that or preparing for their bowl game. Seeing how each individual, although their stats are great, were great leaders too is really important. So when I was up there and I had the opportunity to ask Cam a couple of questions, the first one I asked him was about, since he was a transfer from Washington State, how was he able to really get onto the campus as quick as he did? And we saw it at the spring game. It looked like they were gelled immediately when we saw them play for the first time. So how was he really able to do that, and what did he learn along the way from his different stops to be able to rally the troops pretty much and then eventually have the number one offense in college football?
So beyond Cam Ward, who of course Miami fans are very familiar with his interviews, who was the most compelling interview outside of Ward, and who did you feel like you got the most interesting stories from?
I would say it honestly it's a tough one. Like each one had a really interesting answer for different questions. I think Travis Hunter and John T too like were really like great interviewers or interviewees just from like the different questions they asked, and you can tell that they kind of knew that they were like number one and number two, but they didn't know the order of it in voting. So a lot of that questions you kind of could feel a little bit of the heat coming off like between the competition from them. So it was really interesting to see like kind of how they were prepared like for that moment, like the questions that they were like answering and the way that they were answering it for not only themselves and like their families and like where they're from and all that kind of great stuff, but also like the way that they wanted to like have like that PR spin that they were the Heisman before they knew if they were or not.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Here, by the way, this is from Phil's social media when he's about to sit down with Cam Ward there at the ceremony, and looking at some of the other pictures you took, it's not as like great. Was that just the media room? Was there like a separate media room? Because it didn't look as grandiose as it looks on TV.
Yeah, so the media is in a separate section during the actual award ceremony. Then
Gotcha.
the winner comes back in, and then you have like a 45-minute interview with them following. But all four of them was in the same media room, like for like the podium where like they were asking different questions about like the NFL draft, so on and so forth when they were all together. These rooms were breakout rooms, so you would go one-on-one with each one of the finalists. So in that room to the left of him was where like Travis Hunter was. Around the other side was where Genty was, and then on the other side was Dylan Gabriel. So everyone had like a chance to like be able to see each person.
So, at the end of it, when the votes were released, I wasn't expecting Ward to win the Heisman. I can certainly make my arguments for why I thought he was more deserving, but I was a little, I was very annoyed with him coming in fourth place, especially behind Dylan Gabriel. So Ward wins individual quarterback awards that Gabriel doesn't. So how is he the best quarterback in college football, yet another quarterback gets more Heisman votes than he does? Were you surprised by that, and what do you think went into that?
I mean, when I saw the final votes come through, I definitely gasped a little bit because I was shocked. But I mean, it's one of those kinds of things that the way that we've seen it now, a lot of the voting, it's really who's like the most popular. Like, it makes sense. It's the number one team in the country. Their quarterback's the one that's the head of the team in like directly, give or take. But I mean, any other year though for Heisman, and this is what I've been saying too, like Cam Ward probably would have won, especially given like quarterback history. Like I think it was that yards, touchdowns, so on and so forth. He's in the top half of all the quarterbacks that have won it the last 10 years. So naturally, the one year that it's a Miami Hurricane that we have as a finalist, then we have the running back that really has one of the best seasons ever, and then a two-way player that's unbelievable too. But the one that really did shock me was that Dylan Gabriel got more votes than he did, because if I had a vote, there was no shot on that one.
Yeah, exactly. And I wish I had a vote. I don't have a vote either. Where my vote would have gone. So Phil Russomano is with us, and Phil, we're coming up on the Pop-Tart Bowl on December 28th. First of all, are you going to be covering that? Am I going to see you at the Pop-Tart Bowl?
Probably not. I just moved up to New Jersey, so after like
Oh,
classes ended, so it might be a little bit of a tough one to get back down there.
yeah, I'm actually going to go through a whole journey because I'm basically traveling around the entire state of Florida, seeing relatives for the holidays on my wife's side and my side. But I'm going to interrupt the middle of my holiday festivities to go up and watch the Pop-Tart Bowl. And as far as the game goes, because I know you'll be watching, I want to win the game first and foremost. Cam Ward is going to play. I don't know for sure if he's going to play the entire game. I think he would like to play the entire game. But, Miami fans, they want to see a mix of some of the young players, especially some of the younger receivers, because I don't expect Xavier Restrepo to opt in for the bowl. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I'm not necessarily expecting to see Jacoby George, Elijah Arroyo. So what's your outlook on the Pop-Tarts Bowl, and who would you like to see get some action?
So I think it's going to be interesting for the Pop-Tart Bowl because I know Cam's playing, but my guess is that once he throws one touchdown, they're going to pull him because he has the tied record right now for career touchdowns for NCAA. So if he has that one more, I think they're going to like have him have the record, like take him out, like let him be all ready to go for being either 1 or 2 in the draft. Yeah. But I would love to see like JoJo Trader get a little bit of like action in the game. Like trying to see on defense, I think it's going to be really interesting too because they're like already starting it with the portal, so they're attacking it like heavy. So seeing like what young guys they want to put in there to see like what the competition's going to look like next year too. I would say seeing Lyle come in and like running back too, I think it's going to be really interesting and like fun to see because he had like a couple like runs this year that were big time. So being able to see a couple of those guys, be able to see like all the young guys on defense get in, like I would rather them just play all like freshmen and sophomores like the bowl game at like defense personally, and then have the offense go and like with like pretty much Cam and whoever else that wants to play. But I don't think Restrepo is going to play either too. So I do think it's going to be like a mix of like young guys that we really haven't seen before and like some of like the higher end like players that are going to be in the draft too that are going to play. So it's going to be an interesting like composition of our team.
Going back to Cam Ward, I know you're very interested in where he's going to end up going in the NFL draft. Do you think he's going to be a New York Giant, maybe a New York Jet? Where do you think he's going to end up?
So my Jets unfortunately won last week, so I think they put us out of the Cam Ward sweepstakes on that one. But I do think that if the Giants have the number 1 pick, they're going to take Cam Ward at 1 overall. Like I think that's kind of like what I've been hearing around. But I think he would be great in New York, though. Like he reminds me of kind of like the same demeanor that Eli Manning had with like when things in New York get like really crazy. You like never heard like Eli Manning like worry about the pressure, worry about the moment, anything like that. But I do think that like in terms of like arm talent, being able to have like the awareness and everything like that, as a prospect, he's a much better prospect coming into the draft than Eli Manning was, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I agree with you certainly on being able to handle pressure. Nothing phases Cam. It just he's built different. I think he does a great job compartmentalizing things and not letting the outside noise affect the way he operates his business. So yeah, whether he ends up in New York or any tiny market, I think he'll be fine for it. Well, Phil, I appreciate your time as always. And enjoy the Pop-Tarts Bowl, and hopefully we get the best of both worlds. We get to see some young guys, and we win the game because I know I got a lot of people heading into the Pop-Tarts Bowl like, who cares if we win? But then if Miami loses the game, it's going to be Mario's terrible. He loses another bowl game. It's like, let's try to get the best of both worlds and win the freaking game, man. I appreciate your time.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. It's funny too. This is the old Russell's Athletic Bowl. That was our last bowl win. So hopefully lightning strikes twice.
That's right. Yeah, this bowl game has had a lot of names. Russell Athletic Bowl, Champ Sports Bowl, in the past, the Cheez-It Bowl, now the Pop-Tarts Bowl. So we'll all be eating some Pop-Tarts next week. He's Phil Russomano. Make sure you guys follow him and check him out. We'll talk to you again next time. We appreciate everyone for taking some time on today's episode of Locked On Canes. We'll talk to you again maybe tomorrow, maybe not. Depends on what kind of transfers we're looking at. We'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We're part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.